right. So welcome to the July 8th OpenJ9 community call. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had one of these due to a set of conflicts and then the Canadian Canada Day holiday. So welcome back after a bit of a delay. So before we jump to the lightning talk from Ragu around JITServer Helm charts, I just want to open things up for if there's any questions or comments that people want to kick the meeting off with. All right, then if something does come up during the course of the meeting, feel free to add it to the any other business section at the end of this agenda, and we'll deal with it as we come across it. Ragu, are you on the call and ready to present?
Yes,
all right, do you have slides to share?
Yeah, I have some slides. I'll go through them as quickly as I can.
And I will stop sharing and hand control over to you.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. I'm Ragu Kattinakere. There is an issue open 9443 for making some deployment updates to OpenJ9 so that we can add some deployment options. I'm going through some of the ideas and some of the goals and how the actual deployment techniques and things look like. Primarily, it's going to be Helm chart and OpenShift operators for OpenJ9. The focus is on the JITServer deployment. So the primary goals are some of the things that we are trying to address are we would like to run JITServer and as well as OpenJ9 in hybrid cloud environments, including in OpenShift or any other OpenShift or Kubernetes-based environments and platforms. Kubernetes and OpenShift are sort of leading deployment techniques. Even Cloud Foundry, that used to be very popular, has started adopting them. This is becoming sort of a de facto industry-wide deployment standard. So we have to look at them. And also we have to, once we have the JITServer got to OpenJ9 in January, I guess. And how do we get the OpenJ9 based applications to use JITServer in a very easy way in cloud environments and these Kubernetes based deployments? And on top of that, we need to see, because these softwares and various things are now being made available in repositories, these deployment-based repositories, they call the Helm repositories, operator hubs, and whatnot. It also gives OpenJ9 a very good visibility in various places and makes it easy for them to pick it up. It's easy for somebody in a marketplace to pick them up. So we want to get there and make OpenJ9 available. These are the main goals that we want to sort of achieve.
Ragu, just one comment for a minute. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
we're seeing the speaker's view of your slides right now, and I don't know if that's intentional.
No, I don't have any comments. I just have a full. Oh, okay. So that's because I am using a screen, and that's maybe the reason. What I'll do is I'll switch to my Mac, and that should set things right. Give me a sec. I will go back to the presentation view. I think my presentation view was on this on my screen. Is this all right now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right. So I'll get to the Helm chart directly. So there are two ways of deploying to this Kubernetes-based environments. One is using the Helm chart, other is using the operators. I will just give a brief overview of what they are and how we can use them so that you have a background, and then I can get to a little more details on them. So this picture you're seeing is a flow of how a Helm chart works. If we start from the left side, I hope you can see my cursor. If not, let me know. The left side, the bluish thing you're seeing is a sample, a portion of Helm chart. It is basically nothing but a YAML file where you describe where is your container. These containers are usually the images for these containers, Docker containers or OCI containers, are in either Docker Hub or any other image repository. In our case, it's the adopt images. The function of the Helm chart is to just define what is that you want to deploy, and there's more information about ports and whatnot, but that's the basic of it. There's more to it, but to understand it, that's the most important part. And that's a YAML file. And then the other part I'll explain in two parts. Um, the box you're seeing on the right side is the representation of a Kubernetes server. It could be a remote server on IBM Cloud. It could be on Amazon Web Services. Basically, a cluster of VMs with Kubernetes running on them. Usually how they are dealt with is from a client laptop. So where we have a developer laptop, on the left side you see a small terminal-like thing. That's where you start from. So the of using Helm chart is you have a chart defined that has that has a definition of what you want to deploy. In our case, it's the adopt OpenJ9 image. And then we log into that server. You see the OC kubectl login here on the left side. You log into the remote Kubernetes or the OpenShift server, and then all we have to do is do a Helm install. Helm is a client. Helm comes in two parts. There is a client, and there is it's called the tiller that you see on the right side. When you say Helm install, it picks up, if you see at the top, there is a Helm chart repository here. It picks up the chart from the repository. It asks the tiller on the server to pick up the chart. It picks up the chart, see what image we have to deploy, and pulls the image from the repository. I have this cloudish thing here at the top. It could be Docker Hub, or it could be Red Hat Quay, where these images are stored. It pulls the image and it basically runs the Kubernetes pods on multiple nodes as we define it. We can define multiple replicas or whatnot. And when we are talking about JITServer, because JITServer is by default get built and is part of the OpenJ9 images already, when it is deployed, if we configure the start command to basically make the OpenJ9 behave as JITServer, what gets deployed is a JITServer. And when we deploy JITServer, it's usually a single replica. We just deploy one. Applications, on the other hand, are deployed as multiple replicas, which basically means that there's a couple of copies of an application running, and there is a load balancer in the Kubernetes server and the OpenShift server that whenever the requests come to that application from a web browser or whatnot, it gets routed based on the load on different nodes. This is how a basic Helm thing works. Before I proceed, is there any question I want that should be addressed? I guess not. So I'll proceed. So this was just how a JITServer or even OpenJ9 is deployed. And a little bit on why I said also OpenJ9, because there are, we're obviously familiar, there are two ways of deploying a Java application. I mean, that's what we can categorize it as. One could be a web server, other could be a custom web server, or could be a standalone application. So people, when they want to try a standalone application, for example, which takes in data from a shared volume and processes it and puts back it on the shared volume, and the data on the shared volume is being updated by multiple other applications. So there are scenarios like that where there is no web server as such, but there is a Java application doing some processing. In those situations, we want to deploy even a plain OpenJ9 server. JITServer on OpenShift, how do we deploy it end to end? So we only talked about deploying one application or deploying JITServer. So if you want to deploy a client to use JITServer, there are only two steps. One is we deploy the JITServer onto OpenShift or any Kubernetes platform. And then there is, for example, if you're using a Liberty app, we just have to ask it to compile on the JITServer by updating the environment variable OpenJ9 Java options. That's how our JITServer is designed, but we have to do this in a Helm and operator based way. So I'll just show how that looks like. Apps on um, Liberty applications, the best use case is that applications are already running and somebody wants to deploy JITServer and compile remote. The ideal situation. First thing is they deploy the JITServer, as I showed in the previous couple of slides ago, that do a Helm install and it deploys the JITServer. And then all we have to do is tell the application to basically update the environment variable. I'm in the left side, if you can see, there is a Helm upgrade command. All one has to do is create a values.yaml file that looks something like just has one thing, which is an environment, and has a JVM arg, and that shows that has the JITServer option. Anybody that looks up the JITServer option, use JITServer, and then we have to say what is the name of the JITServer endpoint. This highlighted in bold here. JITServer Helm OpenJ9 chart Java 8 AMD 64. This is what is the name when we deploy a JITServer. You get a name, and that name you just have to use it here. So there are two steps. One is you deploy the JITServer. Second is you create a sample YAML file, and in that you specify all the OpenJ9 options, JITServer options, and then run the Helm update command as in here. Then what happens is when we run the Helm upgrade command, as usual, it redeploys the Liberty applications, redeploys based on, because it already has the image for the Liberty app, everything. Liberty app may have its own Helm chart. So it already has the Helm chart. So it uses its Helm chart to update it. What we are trying to do with this command here is we are overwriting whatever the Helm chart has. It's like more like an override of whatever was there, and add this information. And what happens is the Liberty application gets deployed. On the right side, you see a yellow and a saffron reddish thingy. Basically, there are two redeployments of the application with the new Java option, and it immediately starts compiling on the JITServer. This is how it usually works. And then the other one is the operator. The word operator is actually refers to a machine operator. Somebody, there is a machine and there is an operator. So on the left side, you see here, the difference is in the Helm chart, there is just one application always running. So once it is deployed, it's done. But when you're using an operator basically is another container that runs along with the container for applications or server, whatever it is, along with it, and then is able to do further things on an ongoing basis. That's what is operators. It's a Kubernetes concept, but it is the primary way of deploying things on OpenShift. Even though Helm works, the primary way of deploying on OpenShift is operators. And the way operator works is the similar way. You have a client laptop. You deploy an operator. An operator again is a bunch of YAML files that again define two things in this case. One is where is your application image, Docker image, and also where is your operator image. In this case, there is an addition, which is the operator image. Operator image basically contains the information for what is the application image, and it is the operator that deploys it. In Helm chart, it is the tiller that deploys it, whereas in operators, tiller server running on Kubernetes server, but the Kubernetes itself pulls the operator and deploys it like any other application, and that container basically goes in and looks for the application details and deploys the application. And at the end of it, you will basically see a JITServer. You deploy a JITServer just like you deployed using Helm, and you deploy an application. Deploying using operators kind of look like this. On the right side, you have a sample YAML where which is an YAML for the operator, but not quite the YAML for operator, but it's the YAML that defines where the image that we want to deploy, the application we want to deploy is. I don't want to go into the full details of it, but in short, it looks little. There are more commands in this because we have to deal with the what is called the RBAC or the role-based authentication. Once for cluster, we have to define a bunch of service accounts, role, and bind them and whatnot, and then define custom resource, because an operator basically works on an idea called a custom resource. Custom resources could be an application, it could be a storage, it could be a node. You can define something that is totally a new thing. It need not be an application. So that flexibility is available. And then the last two things you see in the command here at the last two lines, in the bunch of commands in the beginning, all you do is you once we deliver this to, of course, OpenJ9, you clone the operator and then run bunch of this OpenShift. OC is an OpenShift client command, and then you basically deploy the operator first, and then you deploy the JITServer or the OpenJ9 standalone application. Again, when you want to enable the application to compile on JITServer, you basically update the Java options by updating the CR file right here, the custom resource YAML file. You update the environment variable on it, and then you do run an OC create command, which basically deploys the app and asks it to compile on the JITServer. The one thing to note is the JITServer, of course, is Java version specific, and also there is a platform specific builds. So we do have to have an option to specify for JITServer which version of Java and which platform is it referring to. And this can also be done on OpenShift through user interfaces. You can create deployments and you can specify what's the image, whatnot. If you already have an operator, you can point to the operator, you can browse through the operator hub and deploy it as well. But that does not really require any command line things, but it does require an operator that we should have already defined and made available. So where are we with this thing now? We have a Helm chart, a simple Helm chart, and an operator. We are testing them. We have to decide things like what are the names that we have to have, because it's important and it's everywhere. So it plays the hierarchy of directory structure as well. So we have to sort of get an okay for the names and whatnot. I'll be updating the issue with that detail. There is also Google Anthos, which is a sort of an equivalent of OpenShift by Google, which is again a Kubernetes platform, but we are not testing on it right now. But eventually, I think we should be there. I have Chris and I think Iman on the call today. They are working on the operator side of it, and we should have something for review soon. We are kind of going through them and then updating our documents to make them up to date, and it is based on the runtime component operator that recently came out that Dan was alluding to in the issue. As that's it.
Thanks, Ragu. Does anyone have any questions? So I have a couple of, even if no one else does.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I understood the model, the intention is for the Helm chart to deploy the JITServer and to set up the service bindings. And then the operator would, I wasn't quite clear on whether the
Okay.
operator was going to update the applications for you automatically, or if there was still a manual step in there.
So Helm and operators are two things that basically does the same thing. So what I described is I was kind of rushing through, so I had to cover. Um, a Helm is a separate thing, and operator is a separate thing. We could either use Helm or we could use operators. On OpenShift, it's the operators that we use. In a Kubernetes-based environment, usually Helm is used because it's easier, but it does not have all the capabilities, such as once you deployed it, you need to do an update to an existing application. It doesn't have that option. You have to sort of manually do it. Um, so even in the operator, there are two steps. You deploy the JITServer using operators by running running bunch of commands that says OC create JITServer, and then you basically look at the application that you want to update and go to the operator of the application, and then add the environment tags that I mentioned, the OpenJ9 Java options, to its YAML files. There are two lines that you add, and then you can do an OC create for the application. So you have to kind of remove the application and then redeploy the application. We are right now looking at there should be an online way of doing it. We are looking at that. You could use Helm to do that, or you could use Operator to do that. We want to support both, so that way we both get into Helm repositories and Operator repositories, and whichever people want to use, they can use to deploy OpenJ9 and JITServer.
Okay. And you mentioned that, of course, the JITServer is version specific. So how do you see this working if somebody wanted to deploy both a Java 8 and a Java 11 JITServer into the same cluster?
Yeah. So what they have to do is what we are. I think we have a sample of that. Chris has already tested that. Um, you basically we basically have different names for them. So all the servers that we deploy, we have a sample names that we give them, and it has a Java version name and platform name as part of the name. So anybody wants to deploy, they can deploy. It doesn't have to be the same name, but anybody can deploy multiple JIT servers with same versions or with different versions as they require, as long as they have different name for it. They just have to use the same name in the client. So if there is a Java 11 client running, application running, then they have to connect to a Java 11 JITServer, and that's by the name. As long as they know the name, they're fine. But we have come up with a convention where sort of the server name, JITServer name always has a platform name and Java version name as part of it.
Thanks, Ragu. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Yesterday, I think I spent about a couple of hours coming up with this. This may have been a little bit rough. If there are more questions, I can answer on the issue. But if not, if there is some more information required, I can come back with another update.
Thanks, Ragu. And I think it would probably a good idea to continue the discussion in the issue. If you could share the slides either in that issue or make them available somewhere else for others to follow up with, that would be good.
Thank you.
All right, if you can stop sharing, I'll take
Yeah.
over again with.
Let's take. Yeah, it should be back to you.
All right, so given the time, we'll go quickly through some of these other pieces. I will just take a very quick look at the recent raised issues. There's one raised around startup times using a a shared classes cache with group access because the cache was put into the temp directory, which is getting wiped on startup. So there's some discussion there on how to work around that. It's an issue here with the debug tools not finding methods. And then an issue with shared classes enable BCI leading to a class not found exception. Pete, are you aware of this?
I think we were waiting for information. I need to double check.
Okay. And then some of these are also probably within the last couple of weeks when we've missed the meetings, but I'm going to skip over them for now, unless there's any in particular people would like to discuss. Just trying to be cognizant of the time. All right. Just a reminder again to please create help wanted issues and labeling things as good first issue or beginner issues to help drive engagement in the broader community. I see Andrew has updated the Docker Hubs with the new dashboard for tracking data. Having a little bit of trouble reading that. I'm not sure if others are able to read that more easily. But I believe Andrew had to drop off the call, so we'll follow up with him for the next one of these. All right, in terms of our releases, we have the 0.21 release coming up imminently now on July 14th, I believe is the expected date. We've had the milestone 2 builds. They've been advertised, and as far as I know, there's nothing new has come in or been flagged as critical on those builds. So at this point, we are waiting for the OpenJDK changes to hit OpenJDK to mirror them into the extensions repos for any last minute issues, and then we'll get the final builds produced at Adopt. Does anyone have any risks or concerns they want to call out on the 0.21 release? Okay, so we'll continue to monitor that and keep the discussions going on the OpenJ9 Slack channels to monitor finishing out that release. In terms of the next release coming up, it's the 0.22 release for Java 15 in September. I've put in some tentative dates for when we expect the code split to happen, given the expected GA dates, and working back from that what the milestone build dates would be. If there are concerns with the dates I've tagged in there, we can talk about that or adjust them as needed. And then I have tagged some of the major JEPs that are going in to Java 15 that will be affecting OpenJ9 or that we have to add support for. Each of these currently have, each of the JEPs here, the hidden classes, records, foreign memory, the second incubator of that, and sealed classes have each been assigned out to people. So there are people currently working on the development side of these. So the focus will be on making sure that these all land, of course, before 15. And there are a couple of other items that I'm calling out as more major items, and that is there's a spec clarification that final fields and records are not reflectively modifiable, at least not using either reflection or sun and MISC unsafe, and that this applies to hidden classes, records, and static final fields in all classes and interfaces. So we have some work to do there in our reflection code and our unsafe code. And there may be performance opportunities that we could take advantage of this. The other and quite major piece has been the shifting from our current method handle implementation to building and using the OpenJDK implementation. So a lot of this has been ongoing for a while, with the focus being that if there are limitations in our current implementation around being able to OSR out of the JIT and into the interpreter, because of the very different formats used in the two. And so we did some investigation of bytecode generation for method handles, and then decided that given there's a perfectly valid bytecode generator in OpenJDK today, that we should try to reuse that. And so we've been doing a lot of investigation around this and prototype work. And there are some changes coming up in 15 that make it easier if we adopt the OpenJDK implementation here. So we are pushing forward on this, trying to get it to land for 15, recognizing though that this is a very tight timeline. So just be aware that there are a lot of method handle related changes in flight that will hopefully be coming together for this Java 15 release. So I'm sure this is not a complete list of the major items. So if there are other items that are in that milestone 15 plan that people want to flag or highlight here, please add them to this list to make sure that we're tracking or discussing anything that needs additional conversation.
Dan, just a comment on that issue regarding the 292 rework. We may want to consider a situation where if we are going to need it for 15, the new implementation may be default for 15, but we keep the old implementation for the LTS releases, at least for a period of time while we finish doing all the polishing on it.
Yes, that makes sense. Ideally, we'd be able to transition for 15 in September and the next quarterly release in October, but that's a very tight and aggressive timeline. So what you're proposing makes a lot of sense as a fallback if we can't contain all of this in that time frame.
Yeah, I personally would be a bit surprised if we contained it all with enough quality performance guarantees that we wouldn't affect anybody in the LTS streams. But we can discuss that as the implementation progresses. I just wanted to call out that we may need to keep the two implementations in flight over the September-October period, possibly to the next refresh, while we finish, to give ourselves enough time to get all the perf work done.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That's important to make everyone aware of. Thank you. Are there any other, if there are other items that people want to call out here, please do track them in here and we'll make sure that they're getting appropriate focus. Though, of course, the master list of this is the milestone plan. Then I think Shelley put a comment into the chat, so I'm just going to pull that up. In terms of an adopt update, just that we're a week out from the July release, so they're starting to lock down all of the repos at adopt in preparation for that. Is there any other adopt updates that should be called out at this point?
No, I don't think so. Everything else has been fairly stable, and yeah, as Shelley says, we've stopped accepting PRs into the main repositories unless it's for a critical bug fix.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. Adam indicated a comment that there are no major updates to the machines. So unless there are concerns or things that need to be called out here, I will skip over this section then. Right. I'm looking at the website update, and the indication was that this is ready to go, and we're just waiting on a publish. Adam, of course, has dropped off, but do we have anybody who can clarify whether this has gone live yet? I must not be on the call this week, so we'll leave that on to follow up. Devin, do you have an update on the CMake migration?
Yeah, I don't exactly remember where we left off, but for JDK 11, CMake is now the default for XP and Z Linux, as well as OS X, of course. I've got one more patch into OMR. I just need to fix up a typo in there, and then we should be able to use CMake for ARch64 on Linux. And now I'm currently digging into AIX.
Okay. Oops. I don't know if Mark is on the line or if there's any update on the monthly release proposal. I don't hear Mark on the call, so we'll skip that. The next item is the Helm and operator discussion that we started with. Thank you, Ragu. And then the microJIT meetings. I know the first meeting has occurred. And I see that the next one is tagged for July 17th.
Yes. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the one this last Friday because the folks at UNB weren't able to attend. So we'll pick that up at the next scheduled meeting on the 17th.
And sounds like there's been some good discussion both in the meetings and in the issue there. So I encourage everybody interested and involved in this to continue both in the meetings and in the issue to help move this forward. And thanks to you, Andrew, for running those meetings.
No problem, my pleasure.
Is there any other business people want to discuss today? All right, then thank you, everybody, and we'll have the next one of these on July the 15th.
Thank you. Bye.